Hare Krishna. So, as was mentioned at the end of the drama, we are discussing about the 9 processes of devotional service, and the drama was like a prelude to the classes in the future weeks. In the future, we will be discussing about Sakhyam in detail. Today, I'll be discussing about Padsevanam. The word Padsevanam, in Sanskrit we can do the Sandhi Vigraha, the splitting of the word. It's a compound word, Pada and Sevanam. So we can split it in 2 ways, and depending on the way it's split, we'll be having 2 classes. So Padsevanam can mean serving the feet, and it can mean serving with the feet. So serving with the feet means Padau Hari Kshetra Padanusarpane, in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it is described how Ambarish Maharaj performed devotional service. So it is said that Padau, with his lotus feet, with his feet, what did he do? Hari Kshetra Padanusarpane. He went to the various places of Lord Hari. So Padsevanam in that sense can mean going on pilgrimage or doing Dhama Seva. So we have my god brother and friend Baladev Prabhu, who is a Dham specialist. He'll be speaking next week on that aspect of Padsevanam, of Dhama Seva. Today I'll be speaking on Padsevanam in terms of serving the feet. So the process of bhakti is very special in the sense that people normally think of love, when we normally we think of love as the romantic love that is talked about in movies or in novels. First of all, bhakti tells us that emotions which are normally thought of as obstacles on the spiritual path. Normally, people think if you become too emotional, you become too sentimental, then you will get caught up in material things. And even what to speak of in material things, even materially, if people become too emotional, then they can't think clearly. In cricket matches, or in any sports for that matter, if a person becomes too passionate, if a person becomes too emotional, then they say they have a rush of blood and that person plays a rash shot and gets out, or speaks some abusively, and then is in football they have red cards, and in cricket they have various ways in which disciplinary action may be taken. So basic point is that emotions are often thought of as obstacles for rational behavior. And at the same time, this is happening not only in material life, but it also is said in spiritual life. In spiritual life, the general conception is be detached, be calm, be dispassionate. Now that is true at one level. But the process of bhakti-yoga says that emotions don't have to be obstacles to spiritual perception. Far from being roadblocks to spiritual perception, emotions themselves can be the roadways to spiritual perception. The same thing which emotions, which normally can be thought of as roadblocks, as obstacles, they can actually become the roadways, the pathways. How is that? Because let's consider, say here there is a flower. Now I can, the garland, say there's one flower if I take. This flower can be approached from an analytical perspective or from an aesthetic perspective. Now if I approach it from an analytical perspective, I will have the vision of a botanist. I'll say, okay, this is a flower of a particular plant, and there is so many androecium, so many gynoecium, this is the stalk, these are the sperm, these are these ways in which the pollination will take place. So now this is a vision which is useful. But with such a vision, I cannot appreciate the artistry of the flower. Now, if I'm looking at the androecium and the gynoecium, then I'm not looking at the color composition and the shape and the fragrance and the artistry of it all. So there is an analytical way of looking at things, and that has its utility. But as contrasted with analytics, there is aesthetics. And in aesthetics, it is not that there is no analysis, but the primary focus in aesthetics is to gain emotional proximity, to gain comprehension through emotion. The more we can have an emotional connect with the subject, the better we can appreciate it. So the Supreme Lord on other paths, like the path of jnana or the path of yoga, is approached through the rejection of material emotion, which is important. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra says, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So he says, what is yoga? Chitta Vritti, the movement of consciousness, Nirodha, stop it. So he says, stop all emotions, and then one can approach the absolute truth. The Bhakti path says, yes, that is okay, but that is only one part of it. The more important part of it is activate one's spiritual emotions. And once the spiritual emotions are activated, then they not only show us the way, but they take us along the way. The emotions not only enable us to perceive the Lord, but the emotions propel us along the way to the Lord. Just like if there is an engine, if there is a vehicle. Now the vehicle has an engine and the vehicle has fuel. So then the fuel propels the vehicle along. And the person who is traveling in that vehicle, that person gets to move along comfortably through the vehicle, but at the same time that person does not have to expend any energy because the vehicle itself moves along. So similarly, in the process of bhakti, emotion is the vehicle as well as the fuel for the spiritual journey. It shows us the way, it helps us move comfortably along the way. At the same time, it also enables us to get the energy to move along. That means in the path of bhakti, the stronger our emotions become in relationship with Krishna, the sweeter and swifter becomes the progress on the path of bhakti. Now, when we talk about emotions, so the first point which I made is that emotions are the means to progress on the path of bhakti. They are not roadblocks, but roadways. But the second important point is emotions have to be refined. Emotions need to be refined. It's like in any field, if somebody wants to be sometimes some people say, just express yourself. Nowadays, just whatever is in your heart, express yourself. So, and people think bhakti also means like that, just express whatever is in your heart. Now, yes, we want self-expression, which is true. We are at our core souls, and as souls, we want to express our core self. But suppose a person wants to play some musical instrument, somebody wants to play a harmonium, and then that person has never practiced harmonium, never seen anyone practice harmonium, and just comes and starts playing. Yes, that will be self-expression, but that will be the expression of the worst self, not the best self. So, even in an ordinary field, when we talk about self-expression, there has to be training before that. So, a person who is going to play a harmonium, now what is training essentially? Training essentially means nourishing the right actions and suppressing the wrong actions. Now, if a person plays harmonium and plays a wrong key, then, oh, don't do this. They played the right key, no, play this more. So essentially, there is nourishing the right and rejecting the wrong. That is what training is all about. So similarly, in the process of bhakti, when we say we have to develop love for Krishna, the love is not something that just happens. Because of the excessive glamorization of mundane romance in today's world, often people have the idea of love at first sight. Now, yes, something may happen at first sight. People may say, oh, when I touch someone, I feel electric current going through my body. And now they may say that's love at first sight, but actually, whether it is love or not, the important point is, if there is going to be a committed relationship, that will depend not on whether there was love at first sight or not, that will depend on what the people do after many sights. That's what is going to determine the relationship. So quite often what happens at first sight is infatuation. And that sort of infatuation, whether it will sustain or not, that will vary. So in any relationship, for it to be sustainable, emotions are not just something that happen. Emotions are also something that can be made to happen. Made to happen means not that we unnaturally force ourselves, but that there is a way by which emotions can be expressed and nourished. So, just as in any relationship, there may be some initial attraction, which may be infatuation, or which may be the basis of a sustainable attraction, but there has to be a commitment. And commitment essentially means that there is the subordination of the inappropriate emotions, and there is the expression and the expression and the nourishment of the appropriate emotions. So similarly, in the process of bhakti, when we say that we want to become devoted to Krishna, devotion to Krishna may be something which we may feel, maybe first time we come to the temple and hear a kirtan or take darshan, we may feel some attraction to Krishna. And if we feel that, that's wonderful. But along with that, there is a process centered on commitment by which the relationship develops, by which the appropriate emotions in relationship with Krishna become stronger and sweeter. And this process, which is called as the process of bhakti-yoga, now yoga often is equated with certain postures. So India recently pioneered the celebration of the World Yoga Day. So actually there are two main conceptions or misconceptions. There is either physical posturing, that means, yoga means sitting in physical poses. And that's what is the predominant conception in the Western world, where people equate yoga as exercises for trimming the body. Now, in India, yoga, when this World Yoga Day was being celebrated, there was not so much physical posturing as there was political posturing. Political posturing means one group of people wanted to prove that, India, the glory of yoga, the international acceptance of yoga proves the glory of India's ethnic culture. And another group said, we are a secular country and you should not promote one group's one particular religious group's rituals as a national symbol. So in both ways, when yoga is thought of simply as physical posturing, then there is misidentification with the body. Whereas when yoga is associated with political posturing, then there is misidentification with the greater national body, that is the nation. But the essence of yoga, as I said, is yogas chitta vritti nirodha. All the moments of consciousness, which are our conditioned consciousness, identifies with various externals. It may be nationality or it may be our body. And the purpose of yoga is to take us beyond all such misidentifications towards our spiritual essence and towards our source. So yoga essentially, if you look at the word, there are several meanings of the word, but if you look at the original meaning in the dictionary, one of the central meanings is yoga means connection. And bhakti yoga means establishing connection through devotion. So connection of what? Yoga is meant to connect the soul with the super soul, the jiva with the Jagdish, the Manava with the Madhava. So as was depicted very beautifully in the Sudama Krishna drama. So the embrace of Sudama and Krishna, that is the visual representation of the essence of bhakti yoga, that the devotee and the Lord become united in love. Now in bhakti yoga, how does this union, how does this connection of love become established? There are various activities. And Prahlad Maharaj, in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, divides these activities into 9. And those activities which are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam were subsequently analyzed and elaborated by Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And he explains that for each of these activities, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. So the 5th that is mentioned in the list is Padasevanam. So in that he gives examples for each of these activities. Now for Shravanam, who is the example for hearing? Parikshit Maharaj, yes. Shravanam. Kirtanam is Shukadev Goswami, yes. Now there are many people who have done Shravanam, there are many people who have done Kirtanam, but there are certain devotees who have done it in a singularly extraordinary way. And they are said to be the exemplars, the outstanding examples of that limb of devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. So Smaranam is? Yes, Prahlad Maharaj. So Prahlad Maharaj did, when he was threatened, when he was challenged, he just did not try to defend himself, he just focused on remembering the Lord. And the Lord arranged to defend him, to protect him in all times. And then we have what we are discussing, Padasevanam. So who is the representation of Padasevanam? Lakshmi Devi, yes. Now, in the standard depictions of Lakshmi Narayan that are often done, and that is Lord Narayan is lying down in Ananta Shesha and Lakshmi Devi is massaging his feet. So this imagery is having transcendental significance, and people sometimes try to reduce everything down to the material level. And when we try to reduce the transcendental down to the material level, then we often come up with various misunderstandings. That means that it is not when Lakshmi Devi is serving Lord Narayan, what it represents is not necessarily a prototype of the male-female relationship in this world. It represents a transcendental relationship between the Lord and his devotee. Lakshmi Devi is, as the very name indicates, she is the goddess of fortune. And normally speaking, say massaging someone's feet, that is considered to be a menial service. So the same Lakshmi Devi, who is the reservoir of all fortune, she is the goddess of all fortune, and she herself is the recipient of worship. Lakshmi Puja is one of the biggest worships that happen. And why is that goddess, who is herself the recipient of worship, who is the possessor of great opulence, not just great opulence, all opulence, all opulence comes from her only. Why is she serving the Lord? And not only serving the Lord, serving in such a menial seeming way, where she is massaging his lotus feet. That is because there is a relationship of transcendental affection between them. Lakshmi Devi is not just at the feet of the Lord. Now, on the Lord's chest, Shrivatsa is a strip of hair on his chest, and that is Lakshmi Devi. So Lakshmi Devi is also on his chest, and that being on his chest represents that she is always there in his heart. And of course Lakshmi Devi there are other poses of the Lord where Lakshmi Devi and Lord Narayan are sitting on throne together next to each other. But this particular depiction of Lakshmi Narayan indicates that no matter how much opulence we have in this world, still the greatest opulence is to serve the Lord of our heart. And Lakshmi Devi, although she has greater opulence than anyone can have in this world, still she is seeking the supreme opulence of loving service to her Lord. So now in the Bhagavatam, in the 3rd canto, where the description of the spiritual world is given, so there it is said that Lakshmi Devi, she herself cleans the palaces in Vaikuntha. Now, first of all, there are several paradoxes over here. In Vaikuntha, there is no air pollution to cause any dirt to come from anywhere. So, first of all, there is no dirt. Secondly, even if some dirt might be there, there are many other maid servants who can clean. But still, Lakshmi Devi herself cleans because for her, service to the Lord is so relishable. And she wants to taste the sweetness of service, and she wants to relish that service, and she wants to attract the Lord through that spirit of service. Now, this might seem that Krishna is always the recipient of service and the devotees are serving him all the time. This is in general, in material life, people say that if you have a relationship, you should always have equality. If there is no equality, then one person will become the dominator of the other person. And therefore, there should be equal sharing of power or whatever. In various relationships, they say that if there is a inequality of power, then there can always be exploitation. Bhakti is the relationship of ecstatic inequality. Bhakti is the relationship of ecstatic inequality. Inequality means that the devotee never thinks that I am equal to the Lord. Now, at the end of the Sudama story, as our Sudama spoke in English, the Sanskrit shloka which he says is Kwaham daridra papebhyam kwa Krishna Shri Niketana Brahma Bandhu iti smaham bahubhyam parirambhita. So Sudama is praised after his leaving Dwarka, leaving Krishna's palace and going back to his home, and he's thinking Kwaham daridra papebhyam. He says, where am I? I am a daridra, I am a poor person. Sudama is so humble that he is not thinking that my poverty is something. Brahmanas are not just poor because they can't earn. That is one kind of poverty where a person doesn't have the capacity, the intelligence, or just doesn't want to work hard. So there are some welfare countries in the world where people don't work and the government provides for them. So they are poor so that they can get free money from the government. So the Brahmanas, they are poor not because they can't earn, but because they don't want to waste their time in earning. They want to focus on higher spiritual pursuits, and they want to cultivate spiritual knowledge and share spiritual knowledge. That's why they are poor. But Sudama is thinking, he's not thinking like, I am a Brahmana. He says, Kwaham daridra papebhyam. He is taking a humble position, and he is saying that I am poor because I was a sinner. So because I was sinful in the past, so as a reaction to that my sinfulness, I have got poverty now. Now somebody say, no, but you are a Brahmana. And as a Brahmana, for a Brahmana to live simply is an opulence. It's a voluntarily chosen austerity. It's opulence. He says, no. He says, Brahma Bandhu iti smaham. He says, I'm not even a Brahmana. He says, I'm a Brahma Bandhu. I was born in a Brahmana family, but I don't have any Brahmanical qualities. Actually speaking, Sudama represents the summit of a Brahmana. There are different kinds of Brahmanas, but a Brahmana who is devoted to the Supreme Lord, that is the topmost Brahmana. And such is the kind of Brahmana that is Sudama. And yet, what is he saying? He is saying, Brahma Bandhu iti smaham. So he gives 3 disqualifications of himself. I am poor, I am sinful, and I am just a relative of Brahmana, not even a real Brahmana. And in contrast, what is he saying? Koha Krishna Shri Niketana. Where is Krishna, who is Shri Niketana, who is the Lord of the Goddess of Fortune? And yet, what did he do? Bahubhyam parirambhitaha. With his own arms, he embraced me. So the devotee, when I said bhakti is a relationship of ecstatic inequality, what it means is that the devotee, more the devotees become aware of their smallness, and the more they become aware of Krishna's greatness, then the greater is the ecstasy that comes from the love. Even in material life, when people talk about love, you talk about falling in love. Now we talk about rising in love. What is the idea? When there is falling in love, that means that person becomes so captivated by the other person that the person is lost in that other person. That's why falling. So the point is that it is so that a lack of self-consciousness, that not worrying about how big I am, how great I am, just becoming absorbed in one's object of love, that is a characteristic of bhakti. That is a characteristic of love in any relationship. And of course, in most material relationships, when we get captivated by someone, it is quite often not that person, but our imagination of that person that captivates us. And this is not a defect with that person necessarily. It is just that our heart longs for love, and the perfect object for love is Krishna. So we are looking in this world for substitutes for Krishna, and no one can be a substitute. No one can be a substitute for Krishna. And that's why the relationships in this world, for them to be sustainable, there has to be that initial phase where there is that all the fantastic imagination of the mind. When that weans off, what remains after that, that will determine how sustainable the relationship will be. But in the case of Krishna, the more we understand him, the more we go closer to him, the more our understanding of his glory increases. The more his glory becomes revealed to us. How is that? Just like if a person is in complete darkness, say it's night, and then suddenly the sun starts rising. So initially there is dawn, and then sometimes if we are early in the morning, in Brahma Murta we are chanting, say we are walking outside and chanting, it's dark all around, and then we suddenly look, oh, it's light now. It's twilight now, and then we keep chanting, and then we say, oh, it's now morning. So now the rising of the sun is gradual, but our awareness that the sun has risen, that day has manifested, that is abrupt. It happens at certain moments. So like that, as the sun rises more and more, we understand, oh, how much light it is. How much light comes from it. Initially when there is complete darkness, even the slightest twilight, that's impressive. But as the sun rises more and more and more, then the light itself becomes more and more and more. And then we are impressed, oh, there's so much light coming from this one object. Yadadityagatam tejo jagad bhasayate akhilam yachandramasi yachagnav tattejo viddhimamakam. In the Bhagavad Gita, in 15th chapter, 12th verse, Krishna says, Yad adityagatam tejo, that just as one sun illuminates the whole vast sky, and that effulgence, Krishna says, comes from me. So just as the more the sun rises, the more we become aware of the sun's presence, the more our appreciation of the sun's splendor increases. Similarly, the more we go closer to Krishna through bhakti, the more our awareness of Krishna's greatness increases. Radhanath Maharaj says in one lecture, we are all fallen. And if we don't think we are fallen, then we are really fallen. What that means is, suppose a person is a little intoxicated. Then when there's a little intoxication, the person has come out of the bar and they say, hey, maybe I should not drive. I'll look for some friend who can drop me home now. And recently there are big cases of DUI, driving under intoxication. So now when the person is a little intoxicated, there is a little awareness also, I'm drunk. But if the person becomes heavily intoxicated, that person is so drunk that one doesn't even realize I'm drunk. So when a person is very drunk, hey, you should not drive now. No, you're too drunk. Who says I am drunk? The person while speaking also can't speak. Who says I am drunk? Can't even speak that properly, but still that person is very arrogant. I'm not drunk. So when we are a little in illusion, we understand, okay, now I am getting confused, I'm going to illusion. But when we are too deep into illusion, we don't even realize that we are in illusion. So like that, when we are far away from Krishna, we think God, he's so insignificant that he may be non-existent also. No, the ultimate minimization of a person is to say that you don't exist only. Isn't it? It's one thing that if a person exists and we neglect, neglecting is also one form of disrespecting. But to say that somebody doesn't exist, that's the ultimate form of neglect. So, when we are far away from God, we think, why do I need God? God is just people have different ideas. God is just a crutch that some people have invented because they were weak-minded. So, like that, people say God doesn't exist only. But as we start coming closer and closer to Krishna, then we start understanding not only does God exist, but my existence depends on God's existence. I could not exist if God did not exist. What do we mean by this? That sometimes, this is important to understand, I'll lead this to Padsevanam, that when we come to a temple and when we see Krishna present as a deity, now it's wonderful to appreciate Krishna in a personal form. But if we do not have a philosophical understanding, then we may misunderstand. Like sometimes atheists ask this question, that can God create a stone that he cannot lift? So can God make something, if you say God is all powerful, can he make a stone which he cannot lift? Now if you say yes, God can create such a stone that he cannot lift, then there is something he can't do, that he can't lift it. And if you say no, then there is something he can't do, he can't create a stone. So now there are different ways in which this question can be answered. Prabhupada answered in a way, he said that yes, God can create a stone which he cannot lift it, and then he will lift it. Because his energy is infinite, and infinitely it keeps increasing. So what he cannot do at one moment, he can do at the next moment. There is another philosophical way of understanding it, is that when we ask this question, can God create a stone that he cannot lift? There is a fundamental misconception of God in asking this question itself. What is that misconception? That misconception is, we think, okay, stone is here, God is here. Just as stone is one object in the creation, God is also another object in the creation. And then can this object create this object? And can this object create this object to be bigger than this object? So, this conception of God as one object within creation is a misconception. Krishna is not an object within creation. Krishna is the sustenance of all creation. When we want to understand God, there is a definition for God, and the definition of God is Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. So nothing can exist without God. Neither the stone nor the person asking the question about the stone. Nothing can exist without God. Na tatasti vina yatsyan maya bhutam characharam yachapi sarva bhutanam bijam tadaham Arjuna. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 10th chapter, towards the conclusion, after Krishna reveals the Vishwarupa. Now the Vishwarupa is a very fascinating vision. Initially what is happening, just like the ordinary conception. Yes, there is a whole world. In that world, there is a place called Kurukshetra. On Kurukshetra, there is a chariot. On that chariot, there is one place, there is one person in the charioteer's seat, that is Krishna. So this is Krishna who is on one object, in one place, on one planet, within the universe. And then suddenly, what does Krishna do? Krishna says, he says, Divyam dadamite chakshu pashyame yoga aishwaram. Now I give you eyes to see. And then that person who seemed to be one object within the universe, that person reveals that the whole universe is inside him. So when we understand God, he is not just one object within the universe whom we are asking, okay, can he create another object? No, God is the source, the sustainer of everything in existence. So the question, can God create an object, okay, create a stone he can't lift? This comes from a misunderstanding about what God means. Now, God is not another object like a stone in this world. God is the sustenance of the whole world. Without God, nothing can exist. absolutely nothing can exist without God. And in fact, the more we have studied science, the more science points towards the existence of God also. This is a whole different subject. But simply to make this point here, that actually science has found the whole world is so well organized. So where does the organization come from? Even if we say that all according to nature's laws, how do nature laws come from? They come from God. So now, the point which I am making here is, God is not an explanatory alternative to logic. God is not an explanatory alternative to logic. God is the explanatory foundation for explainability. That means you have one logical explanation and you have another explanation which is not so logical. It's not like that. How did Krishna lift up Govardhan Hill? Now, how did he find out the center of gravity of Govardhan Hill, by which he put his finger over there? Now, if you believe that Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill, you are unscientific. You are unscientific. You don't understand the law of gravity. So, is it like science is one explanation and God is another explanation? This is the idea that many people have. And when people have this idea, they say the more science advances, the more we will not need God. That is the idea. So what I am saying is, God is not an explanatory alternative to science. God or logic or whatever system of thought we humans might come up with, God is not an explanatory alternative to that. God is the explanatory foundation for explainability. We may say that, oh, how can somebody have so much strength to lift up a huge mountain? Because its weight will be so much, the gravity pull will be so strong. But now Krishna doesn't have to find the center of gravity, because Krishna is the source of gravity. Krishna is the explanation for explainability. Why do we have logical answers to questions in this world? Where did logic come from? Krishna is the basis of logic. So why I'm talking about this is, as we come closer to Krishna, both from an intellectual perspective as well as from an emotional perspective, our appreciation for Krishna increases. And that increased appreciation for Krishna we express through humble service. So when we say Padsevanam, humble service to the Lord, menial service, that is because there is a symbiotic connection between emotion and action. There is a symbiotic connection between emotion and action. The way we act, that affects our emotions. Suppose, I want to feel humble. And imagine I just lean my head back, put my hands behind this, raise my legs high up. And I say, I'm feeling very humble now. Now, I am making a mockery of humility by saying like this. Actually, the way we act, it affects our emotions internally. So, the principle of Padsevanam, of rendering humble service, is that by acting in a humble way externally, humility is developed internally. As there is a symbiotic connection between action and emotion, symbiotic means that both nourish each other. So the action strengthens the emotion and the emotion strengthens the action. So that's why when we render humble service to the Lord, render humble service to His devotees, then that humility, the mood of humility is developed more and more. And when the mood of humility is developed more and more, the more we can appreciate Krishna's glories. If we are so filled with ourselves, thinking, I am so great, I am so great, I am so great, then we cannot understand Krishna's greatness, because we are filled with ourselves. But when we develop humility, then our heart becomes a place where Krishna's glories can manifest, and then we can relish those glories. So I'll conclude this with one last point, then we can have question answers. That when we talk about Padsevanam, as I said, that bhakti is a relationship of ecstatic inequality, where the more we understand our smallness and the more we understand Krishna's greatness, the more we can relish the sweetness of bhakti. the more we can relish Krishna Prem. But this doesn't mean that Krishna is like a boss. All of you bow down to me. The lower you bow down to me, the more favor I'll give to you. Is Krishna that kind of boss? Not at all. Why not? Because if we see first of all in Vrindavan, Krishna does not act like God. Krishna in Vrindavan, he conceals his godhood so that love can reign supreme. He doesn't act as with Mother Yashoda as if he's God. No, he acts just as a small boy, naughty boy, so that Mother Yashoda's love for him can overflow. So Krishna, although he is God, he is not interested in brandishing his godhood to make all of us be subordinate to him. He simply wants the reciprocation of love. And for the reciprocation of love, he goes to the extent of concealing his godhood so that devotees can love him with intensity. But then he says that even that is not enough. Krishna in Vrindavan, the gopis, they simultaneously know and they don't know that Krishna is God. In the Gopi Gita, the gopis say that at one level they are saying Fani Fanarpitam Te Padambujam Krunakuche Shuna Krundiruchayam. When the gopis are separated from Krishna, they are searching for him frantically. They go deep into the forest, so deep that even moonlight can't penetrate into the forest, so pitch dark. Realizing that they can't find Krishna now, they come back and they sit on the banks of the Jamuna, and there they start composing the Gopi Gita. And Jiva Goswami describes in Gopal Champu that each of the verses of Gopi Gita is sung by one gopi, and each of them is expressing her heart to Krishna. So here, in the Gopi Gita, at one level it is said, Krishna, your lotus feet you offered to Kaliya. Fani Fanar Pitam, that your lotus feet are so powerful that you crush the 1,000-hooded serpent Kaliya. So here they are aware that Krishna's lotus feet are so powerful that they can crush even the venomous serpent with dangerous fangs such as Kaliya. But just a few verses later, what is the thing in Gopi Gita? They are saying, Nalina Sundaram Nathate Padam Shilatrunankurai Sidatitina Kalilatamana Kanta Gachate. So they are praying that Shilatrunankurai Sidatitina, Krishna, you have left us and gone away. You have gone deep into the forest, and in the forest there are pebbles, there are thorns, there are brambles, and all of them may pierce your feet. And thinking that your tender feet will be pierced by the pebbles, that is ripping our heart apart. Krishna, please come back. So now here, the pebbles and whatever wound they can cause, that is insignificant as compared to the wound that Kaliya's fangs can cause. And the same gopis who know that Krishna's lotus feet have crushed the fanged hoods of Kaliya, they are in anxiety. What will happen by the piercing of the feet of Krishna by some thorns? So this is Padsevanam at the level of Smaranam. What are the gopis doing? They are serving Krishna's lotus feet by remembering in love. Oh, let Krishna's lotus feet be protected. Let Krishna's lotus feet not be hurt. So at one level, when they are remembering Krishna's lotus feet crushed Kaliya's hoods, they are remembering the glory, the greatness of those lotus feet. And when they are thinking, oh, these will be pierced by Krishna, by the thorns, they are thinking, oh, these are objects of service for us. The same lotus feet can be the objects of protection when they are crushing a demon like Kaliya, and the same lotus feet can be the object of service when the devotee wants to offer all comfort and doesn't want the least of discomfort for those lotus feet. So now the point is that here the gopis, for them, although they are aware that Krishna is God, Krishna, while normally relating with them, doesn't act as if he is God. He conceals his godhood so that there can be the intensity of love, so that there can be heightened intensity of love. But still, Krishna is not satisfied even when there is this intimate love. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is described that Aishwarya Shithila Prem na Ishwara Bhujay. Is that when there is opulence in love, Krishna is not satisfied with that, because he feels that the devotee's love is not unhesitant. Oh, this is God, I cannot accept. How can I love him? How can I treat him just like a friend? How can I treat him like an equal? So, Krishna, although he is God, the sweetness of bhakti, the sweetness of Padsevanam is so great that Krishna, as I said, bhakti is the relationship of ecstatic inequality. So Krishna is here, the devotee is here. And the devotee wants to humble oneself to the lotus feet of the Lord. But Krishna sees that the devotee is relishing so much nectar. So what Krishna does is, he shifts his position from here to here. And Krishna also becomes a devotee. And that is the manifestation as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in this manifestation as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is trying to relish the sweetness of his own lotus feet. Now Krishna does this earlier also in the Markandeya Rishi. It is described in Markandeya Puran as well as in Bhagavad Puran. Markandeya Rishi, at one time he sees that what is Krishna doing? Kararavindena padaravindam mukharavinde viniveshayantam patasya patrasya puteshayanam balam mukundam manasa smarami. So Krishna, he says that my devotees are relishing so much nectar in serving my feet. He wants to know what is the sweetness in my feet. Now if Krishna is sitting as Dwarkadhish in his palace, or in Dwarka, or Krishna is sitting as Vaikuntanath in Vaikuntha, now at that time he cannot suddenly pick up his feet and put into his mouth. So he wants to know what is this joy of Padasevanam. So Krishna performs a leela and he manifests a form as a small baby. And children, they are in Annamaya Kosh. Annamaya Kosh means everything is potential food. For children, there is, everything is unified as one object. It is potential food. So they may drink milk from mother's breast, they may drink milk from a bottle, they may suck their fingers, whatever they get, their way of perceiving it is through the tongue. So like that, children sometimes take their foot also and put into their mouth. So Krishna does that over here. Kararavindena kar arvinda. This poetry where there's alliteration, repetition of the same word Aravinda. So with his lotus hand, Kararavindena Padaravindam, he takes his lotus feet and then Mukharavinde, he puts it into his mouth and he's licking his toes. He says, what is this taste? What is the taste of my feet that my devotees are relishing so much and I am missing it? So actually, when we start practicing bhakti, when we hear, okay, I have to become humble, I have to do menial service, we have an idea that in this world, the bigger I become, the more famous I become, the more influential I become, the happier I'll become. Because actually, in the world when we live, especially when we live in crowded metropolis, the sheer number of people and the sheer velocity of the life threatens to reduce us into nobodies. It's just like we are just one cipher in the statistics of the city. So we all want to have a sense of identity. And often we think that the sense of identity will come by if I become more famous, more wealthy, more influential, then I will get a sense of self-identity. And then I will delight in how famous I am. Now there are two problems with this. First is, if we want to delight in our glories, first problem is we don't have too much glories. There may be, we might be able to do one thing, two things, three things, something famous we may do. But how much? And secondly, whatever glories we have, they can go away at any moment. Somebody might become very famous, but then there will always be someone else who becomes more famous. and then one's position is threatened and taken away. So rather than trying to seek a sense of identity by making ourselves bigger, a devotee tries to get a sense of identity by connecting with the biggest Lord, by connecting with the biggest person. And when you connect with Krishna, therein, because Krishna's glories are unlimited, and because the connection with Krishna is eternal, therein comes everlasting happiness. And that happiness is so great that Prahlad Maharaj says, Twadvirya gayan mahamritamagna chitta shochetato vimukachetasa indriyarthan. He says that, O Lord, in reciting your glories, in relishing the taste of your lotus feet, there is such nectar that I feel sad for all those people who are missing this nectar. Now normally, when we start practicing bhakti, we give up the gross material forms of enjoyment. And when we give up that enjoyment, our mind at the back always makes us feel, hey, you are missing something. You are missing something. Maybe you would have enjoyed so much if you had done that. You had done that, you had done that. So we feel, when we are practicing bhakti, we feel as if we are missing something because we have renounced material pleasures. That's because right now we are not connected with Krishna fully. But Prahlad Maharaj, who is connected with Krishna, who is relishing the taste of Krishna's lotus feet, what does he feel? He doesn't feel as if I am missing something. He feels those who are not having this, they are missing something. So, oh, they are missing, let me share this with them. So Padsevanam, the taste of the lotus feet of Krishna, which we can get by connecting with him in devotion, by rendering humble service to him, that is life's greatest fulfillment. And that is what is available to us by the practice of bhakti yoga. So I'll summarize. I started by talking about how love is not just something that happens. It can also be something that is made to happen. So in bhakti, emotion is not the roadblock to perception, it is the roadway to perception. But then that emotion has to be developed. Just like a person cannot have self-expression, just arbitrary playing of a harmonium. One has to train. So like that, bhakti means training our emotions. And then we discussed about when we try to relate with the Lord, the bhakti is a relationship of ecstatic inequality. The more we can free ourselves from obsession with our greatness, the more our heart becomes free to relish Krishna's greatness. And thus we can relish the sweetness of bhakti more and more. And there is a symbiotic relationship between action and emotion. So the more we act in a humble way, the more the emotion of humility within us will develop. And in both ways, through the action and the emotion of humility, our attraction to Krishna and our taste in our relationship with him will increase. And service to Krishna, service to his lotus feet, as manifested in Padsevanam, is so great a treasure that even the goddess of fortune considers that her greatest treasure. And in the relationship of bhakti, it is not that Krishna is a boss and everyone has to serve him. Krishna himself conceals his godhood so that he can also taste the sweetness of love and love more and more. And further, he shifts himself from the position of God to the position of devotee to relish the sweetness of bhakti, the sweetness of Padsevanam. So we discussed about how Krishna manifests as the baby Bala Mukunda, as is visualized or as was revealed to Markandeya Rishi, and also how Krishna manifests as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to taste the sweetness of bhakti. And the more we can internalize the mood of humble service, the more we will relish the sweetness of bhakti. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, please. Yeah. If you would like to send on chits, you can send the question on chits also.
Hare Krishna. As as you said that humility is required in bhakti, but what happens that in psychological perspective, humility means inferiority complex. So people tend to advise such people to go to counselor or psychiatrist. So would you like to comment on this?
Okay, good question. The question is that we say that we should become humble in bhakti, but often there is people who are humble, they are thought of as having inferiority complex, and they are told to go to psychologists for counseling. There's a fundamental difference between humility and inferiority complex. Inferiority complex is false ego frustrated. Humility is false ego rejected. What that means is, when a person has inferiority complex, that person wants to have an ego. Yeah, I want to be big, I want to be famous, I want the whole world to respect me. But I don't have any talents by which the world will respect me. So what to do? I become frustrated. So humility, inferiority, feelings of inferiority, that inferiority complex, that is false ego frustrated. Whereas humility is false ego rejected. That means a devotee who is humble, a person doesn't seek happiness through the recognition by the world. A devotee seeks happiness through the connection with Krishna. And by that connection with Krishna, the devotee gets a higher happiness, and that's why it's false ego rejected. So that's firstly a difference. Now if we look at further, if we look at the history of this term inferiority complex, how did it come up? See, whether it is India or the West, prior to the 20th century, 19th century and before that, this whole economy was largely agrarian. And people lived in their own communities, whether it was villages or towns, and they lived in their own social circles. But when the industrialization of the economy happened, then there was urbanization, and then when there was this migration, then people had to, practically speaking, for their employment, for their survival, they had to compete with the whole world, because they were going to unfamiliar places for jobs or for education. And then at that time, if you look at the history of English language, there was no such word called personality before the 19th century. Now, but from the 20th century onwards roughly, the person became not important, the personality became important. Personality means how you look. What is the impression that you give to people? Now, what are the impressions inside you doesn't matter. What is the impression that you can cast before others? That's what is important. And for that, there are certain external attributes. You should speak in this way, you should walk in this way, you should conduct yourself in this way. So a lot became dependent on external attributes which had very little to do with the core character of the person. And because of this, because of excessive emphasis on personality at the expense of the person, because of excessive emphasis on personality at the emphasis of the person, the sense of self-identity shifted from who I am to who I appear to the world. And that appearance is always unsteady. So inferiority complex largely results when we buy into a worldview that glamorizes certain characteristics of the personality. Now, God has given us all different abilities, and with our abilities, we all can make a constructive contribution. We all can lead worthwhile, productive, valuable lives with whatever abilities we have. But when we buy into society's definition, okay, if you have these qualities, if you have these looks, this kind of speech, this kind of personality, then you are a successful person. Otherwise, you are good for nothing. So once we buy into that definition, then it's natural that there is going to be inferiority complex. Why? Because the kind of, one of the easiest ways to become miserable is to start watching advertisements. Just watch advertisements, advertisements of people who have perfect figures, people who have handsome looks, people who have wealth, people who have charisma, people who have fluency in speech. They have everything. And when we see that, we'll actually start feeling inferior. So, actually speaking, the materialistic worldview, which divorces the person from the personality, that is the cause of the inferiority complex. So when we start practicing bhakti yoga, we understand who we are as souls. When we understand our identity as souls, at that time we understand that we are parts of Krishna. And irrespective of how much the world recognizes us or not, Krishna still loves us. And the understanding of our indestructible spiritual identity, the understanding of Krishna's eternal unconditional love for us, that becomes a devotee's basis for self-identity and self-worth. And that's how, by spiritual education and by spiritual purification, by spiritual realization, a devotee can become free from inferiority complex. So certainly we should not mistake humility to be inferiority complex. Rather, the two are very different things, and in fact the development of bhakti, of which humility is a part, the development of bhakti can counter inferiority complex at its very root. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Paul.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanvat Pranam. I wanted to ask something related to humility. Yudhishthira Maharaj in Mahabharata says that the war happened because of me. At one point, the Goswamis, some of the Goswamis say that we are more fallen than Jagai and Madai. So, factually speaking, these facts are quite incorrect, because 6 Goswamis are not more fallen than Jagai and Madai. And the war also did not happen because of Yudhishthira Maharaj, but they are actually being humble and showing humility. So does humility mean being honest, or does it mean entail being dishonest? I am not able to understand that.
Okay. The question is that Yudhishthira Maharaj said that the war happened because of me, or the Goswamis say that I am more fallen than Jagai and Madai. Now these are not true facts, objectively speaking. So does humility mean being honest, or does it mean that we are dishonest? No, there is material dishonesty where I do a mistake and I pass the blame to others. Now, there is a saying that whenever there is success, success has many parents, and failure is an orphan. So whenever something goes wrong, nobody wants to take responsibility. So failure is an orphan, that's all. So that means there is that level of material dishonesty where we don't accept blame for what wrong we have done. Then there is material honesty, where we admit, the buck stops here. Yes, I accept responsibility. This is what happened. This is what went wrong. So that is material honesty. And certainly, honesty is the foundation of humility. That means that if we truly understand who we are, yes, I may have some abilities right now, but those abilities are not my own abilities. They are gifts given by Krishna. And they may be there with me for some time, and they may be regularly with me, because of which I think they are mine. But in due course of time, they will be taken away. The most drastic example of this is Arjuna. He was such a heroic warrior throughout the Mahabharata, and towards the end of his manifested pastimes, He couldn't even fight against some cowherds. He lost his archery ability. So our abilities are gifts given to us by Krishna. So if we understand this, then we won't become proud of our abilities. So humility requires honesty, and in fact honesty will naturally lead to humility, because we'll understand, even if I have some abilities, even if there may be the best cricket batsman who has outstanding talent to play all kinds of shots, but sometimes even that best batsman goes out of form, and then that person goes out and gets out for a very ignominious duck, and then that everybody blames that person, and then that person goes into depression thinking what went wrong. Now if the abilities were that batsman's abilities entirely, then why did that person go out of form, go out of touch? So that means that our abilities are not entirely our abilities. They are gifts given by God to us. So humility is the foundation, is founded on honesty. That is the level at which we can function. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna talks about humility in 13.8 to 12, when he talks about the 20 qualities that comprise knowledge, so he talks about it in negative terms. That means amanitvam adambhitvam. So he says amanitvam. He doesn't say namrata, that is also humility, but he talks about negative amanitvam and adambhitvam. Now what is the difference between the two? Prabhupada translated that as humility and pridelessness. If we look at Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, he explains that dambha, the difference between dambha and man is when I have certain qualities and I expect respect for those qualities. Dambha means I don't have any qualities, but I pretend to have those qualities so that I can get respect from others. So I am not a religious person, I have no devotion to God, but when there is some social occasion where everybody goes to a temple, I will go to the temple so that people can have darshan of me. Oh, such a good person, he comes to the temple also. So dambha means when we claim honor for the abilities that we don't have. That is, I'm talking about the third level, dishonesty. So adambhitvam is certainly required, but Krishna also says amanitvam. Amanitvam means that one does not seek honor even when one has honorable qualities and honorable conduct. So Prabhupada explains in his commentary there that one should not be anxious, that humility means to not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. Now it's a very deep definition. To not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. That means, he's not saying that humility means one should not be honored by others. Humility does not mean that we behave in dishonorable ways. No, we behave in an honorable way, and in the course of events, if honor comes, we accept honor. Humility in this context means that we accept honor, but we don't expect honor. We don't expect honor. Amanitvam. So this is the level of humility which we should aspire for. So to put it another way, humility means to not let our ego come in the way of our service. That okay, whatever I am expected to do, I will do. If in the course of that I get respect, fine. If I don't get respect, still I will find some other way to continue my service. So Srila Prabhupada, when he was in India, he was, at least at the nominal level, he was respected. A sadhu is respected in Indian culture, so people would host him, people would come and hear his lectures, but they were not ready to make much commitment. They thought, oh, there are so many sadhus, and it's a part of our pious culture to hear from sadhus. But their idea was, you hear from sadhus, and the sadhu goes on with his life, and we go on with our life. They don't think that we have to change anything in our life. And Prabhupada came to Sumti Morarji, who later sponsored Prabhupada's travel to America. So she saw the Swamiji is so elderly, how can he go to America? So he said, Swamiji, if you want to seek Bhagavatam, you come to my house. Every day I'll hear Bhagavatam from you. So Prabhupada actually wanted to speak Bhagavatam, but in a way that transformed people's hearts. So externally speaking, when Srila Prabhupada went from India to America, from the Vedic perspective, the Western world is considered degraded. But even from the Western world's perspective, the place where the hippies were living, the Lower East Side, the Haight Ishbury, that was degraded. So Prabhupada went to the most degraded place among the degraded place, and there people had no conception of respecting him. But still he went there because he saw there was a spark of interest in Krishna among those people. And he found that. So humility means to not let our ego come in the way of our service. So Prabhupada, yes, he actually would have got, from the cultural perspective, more respect in India, and he got far lesser respect from at least in the initial days. Later on, when they understood the philosophy, then that was different. But initially, so the point is, the devotees focus on the service, and for a service, whatever is required, we do that. So if it requires taking up a position of honor and rendering service, we do that. If it requires accepting a position where we will be reviled and neglected, we may accept that also. Now the same Srila Prabhupada who went to America all alone, with practically no contacts, no finances, no organizational support. It is like, one single soldier going to attack a whole kingdom. And what is the soldier will be thinking, what will be my strategy? How will I go inside? Even when Hanuman went to Lanka, his plan was not to destroy Lanka. His plan was primarily to find Sita. But then he found Sita, then when Ravana burned his tail, he thought, let me do some more fun. And he decided to, he didn't even plan to burn half of Lanka, but half of Lanka got burned over there. So the point is that one soldier going is very difficult to do that. When Prabhupada was going to America, he was going on a historically unprecedentedly challenging mission. But what was his thought? He was in his heart thinking that, oh Lord, I am an insignificant, unfortunate beggar. I have no capacity to change people's hearts. You please make my words understandable to them. So now what is this? Is it that Prabhupada he says, I have no capacity to speak to others? And when Prabhupada spoke that, he was not referring to the fact that his English pronunciation was not understandable to the Western people. He was referring to something much deeper. That was when the devotee wants to serve the Lord, at that time the devotee feels that the Lord is so glorious, His service is so glorious, I am incapable of doing that service. So that when a devotee feels that I am at fault or I am unqualified, that feeling is primarily a feeling that comes by an increased awareness of Krishna's glory. As compared to Krishna's greatness, what am I? So when, say, the Goswamis say that I am more fallen than Jagai and Madai, is that an objective truth? No, it's not. But from their devotional perspective, when they are realizing Krishna is so great and Krishna loves me so much, Krishna has bestowed so much mercy on me, as compared to that, I have done nothing to reciprocate with him, and therefore I am so unfortunate. Now, although Krishna has done so much, I have done nothing for him. So this transcendental psychology, wherein the devotee, being so overwhelmed by an awareness of Krishna's greatness and Krishna's love, feels oneself utterly insignificant. That is a testimony to their deep absorption in Krishna. So the transcendental love for Krishna is beyond material logic and material perceptions. So to give another example of this, say Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it was said that when he was going towards Vrindavan, every forest that he saw, what did he think of it to be? Vrindavan. Every lake, every water body he saw Yamuna. Now, was that forest Vrindavan or not? If you say it was not, then can God commit a mistake? Now God is, you say, to be illusioned is one of the defects of a conditioned soul. Now here God is getting illusioned. He's thinking that some ordinary forest is Vrindavan. Is he getting into illusion? Now the fact is that at one level he thought of the forest as Vrindavan, but still he kept going towards Vrindavan also. He did not stop there. So when we consider transcendental love, the benchmark for understanding transcendental love is not agreement or disagreement with material facts. The benchmark for appreciating transcendental love is the extent of absorption in Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's perceiving an ordinary forest to be Vrindavan is testimony to the absorption of his heart in Vrindavan, to his intense longing for Vrindavan. And that's why it's a bhushana, it's a opulence, it's not a dushana, it's not a contamination. So similarly, so that was from the Lord's perspective. Similarly, from the devotee's perspective, when the devotee feels something counterfactual, like as you said, Yudhishthira Maharaj feeling I was responsible for the war, or Sudama feeling that I am simply a bandhu of a Brahmana, I am not even a Brahmana. So this is the devotee, this is testimony to the devotee's awareness and absorption in Krishna's greatness, as compared to which whatever one may be that seems to be so dwarfed as to be insignificant. So there is material dishonesty, there is material honesty, and there is transcendental perception where things may appear to be counterfactual. But in transcendental perception, the benchmark is not agreement or disagreement with material factuality. The benchmark is absorption in Krishna. So as devotees, we don't artificially imitate the Goswamis or those exalted emotions wherein the devotees take blame for that which they are not done also. What we focus on is trying to develop humility at the level of honesty, where we understand our identity, and based on that understanding of our identity, we appreciate that without Krishna I am nothing. Krishna is what is enabling me to do everything. And that is the humility that we aspire for. And as we become advanced, as our consciousness becomes absorbed in Krishna, then these counterfactual expressions of humility will emerge spontaneously, because there will be so absorbed in Krishna that whatever we do, it will seem insignificant in relationship with Krishna. So we focus on developing humility at the level of honesty. Does it answer your question? Any other questions? Oh, yeah. You can get the mic here. So the question is, how do we change our habits? The Sunday program is very inspiring, but when we go back home, we fall back into our old habits. Yes, there is two aspects to changing habits. One is rejection and the other is replacement. Rejection of a habit is usually difficult. Replacement is much easier. So if you're just coming to the Sunday program, that is developing a positive habit. And in general, the process of bhakti focuses not so much on saying no to the wrong things as saying yes to the right things. Now, rather than tadvan riktamatayo sroto ganastamaranam bhajavasudevam. So it says riktamatayo. There are some impersonalists, some spiritualists who say, I won't do this, I won't do this, I won't do this. So the focus is on what we will not do. But then that is never very satisfying. Now what I am not to do, thinking about that only increases the craving. Maybe I should do it. So we need some positive focus for our thoughts. So try to replace the negative habits by positive habits. Try to cultivate positive habits and fill the schedule externally with positive activities, and fill the mind internally with positive thoughts and positive contemplations. And by that, the old habits will fall away. And there will be a gradual process in this. We need to be patient. There are no instant habits. So usually we can create two kinds of supports for ourselves. One is pushers towards the positive, and the second is blockers from the negative. That means pushers towards the positive means if we have developed some positive habits, Say coming to the association of devotees regularly, or chanting our rounds regularly, doing japa regularly, whatever it is, then if we have some friends, some social circle, some devotee circle, where we keep pushing each other, so others push us towards the positive. Okay, if we decide that, if I find that studying scripture, hearing classes inspires me a lot, then I should hear classes regularly. And if we have a friend who reminds, so did you do some hearing today? Or did you do some hearing this week? So that we have some pushers towards the positive, those who push us towards the positive. And along with that, what is also important is that blockers from the negative. Blockers from the negative means that if we have certain habits which we want to break, then it's vital that we don't keep the opportunity for indulging in those habits readily available to us. So for example, if say at extreme level, if somebody is an alcoholic, the first thing if a person wants to give up alcohol is, don't mix with other alcoholics. Somebody may say, no, I'll go, they're all my friends, but I won't drink. That is a determination which will be washed away by that association, swept away. So we have to create some external, some blockers. So if I have a habit of surfing on wrong sites, then put some net filter on the mobile or on the laptop or whatever, by which we create blockers. So by these two things, first of all, filling our life externally with positive activities and our mind and heart internally with positive thoughts, that's one thing. And second, that's with respect to an overall change of lifestyle. And secondly, by creating some pushers towards the positive and some blockers from the negative, we will find that it will be easier for us to overcome the bad habits and to replace them with good habits. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhuji, we worship the personal form of the Lord, and at the same time, the holy name is equal to the Lord. But the holy name is the sound vibration, which is like a formless feature of the Lord. So aren't the two, contrary? We worship the sound, which is a formless feature, and
so the question is that we worship the deity form of the Lord, which is personal, but then we also worship the sound manifestation, which is like impersonal. So isn't there a contradiction? Ityamurti abhidanena mantra murtim amurtikam. It is said about Narad Muni in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ityamurti abhidanena mantra murtim amurtikam. That Lord who has no material form, whose form is not manifested at the material level, he was worshipped through mantra murti, through the form of the mantra. So when we talk about the Lord's form, we often carry a material conception of form. That means, okay, something has a particular shape, and then that is something which we say is form. But Krishna's form is transcendental. And when we have the deity of a particular form, that deity's form is based on scriptural description of Krishna's transcendental form. But still, Krishna's form is eternal. Krishna's form is transcendental. And when we become spiritually realized, at that time we will pursue Krishna's form. So now the deity and the holy name, both are the transcendental Lord manifesting at the material level to give us access to him. So the deity is the visual manifestation of God, and the mantra is the sonic manifestation of God. So both of them are manifestations to give us access to transcendence. So when we chant the holy names, we are involving our tongue, our ears primarily, and of course our consciousness, our heart. But it's the tongue and the ears. So now when the Lord manifests in different manifestations to give us spiritual direction to our various senses, at that time he will manifest in the form appropriate to those senses. So that's why it's not that that when Krishna is manifesting as the holy name, it is a formless manifestation. It is that same Krishna who is transcendental manifesting as sound. So it is a sonic manifestation of the divine. And for those devotees who become purified by the chanting of the holy names, then it is revealed gradually abhinnatvam nama namino, that the sound of the mantra, the name of the Lord, is non-different from the Lord. So at our level, it may seem as if the sound vibration, the holy name, the mantra, might seem like an impersonal manifestation. But that's not that because the Lord is impersonal, but that's because we have not yet connected in our mind the sound vibration or the sonic manifestation of God with God. Just like if we call out someone's name. Now, normally when we call out someone's name, as soon as we call out that name, immediately we think of that person. And we know there is a person. So this name is intrinsically connected with that person. Although that connection is not of non-difference. It's not that when you call that person immediately comes over there. No, that person is a different person at some other place. But in the case of Krishna, he is non-different from his name. But we have not yet connected in our consciousness the sound vibration of the mantra with the transcendental manifestation of Krishna as a transcendental person. So that's why along with the chanting, we also do deity worship. And in the deity worship, even to our perception, the personal manifestation, the Lord manifests in a personal form, manifestation. And by doing deity worship and by doing chanting along with deity worship, then we can in a visually evocative way remind ourselves that this is not just some sound vibration I'm uttering, this is a person whom I am calling. And with this awareness, as we become purified by chanting and by deity worship, the non-difference between the holy name and Krishna himself, Krishna's personal manifestation, will be revealed to us. So they are not the manifestation, the deity worship and chanting of holy names, they are not contradictory, they are complementary. There's the same Supreme Lord manifesting through a visual manifestation, through a sonic manifestation, and both offer manifestations by which we can raise our consciousness to transcendence, where we will realize the transcendental personal form of the Lord. Okay? Yes,
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Just given the kind of lives that we lead, specifically those who are working in corporate organizations and everything, very, very passionate lives. And in the Gita, Krishna says, Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha. So, remember me and fight. But in our day-to-day lives, when we are working in such extremely Ugra Karma, passionate environments, it is impossible to remember Krishna while we are working. Before we are working, after we are working, yes, it is possible. But while we are working, we get so absorbed in that it's impossible. So while we can make some mental compromises, and philosophical explanations, how do we understand that really? How do we fight while remembering Krishna? Is that practically possible?
Yeah. So the question is, if we work in the corporate world, which is very passionate, how can we remember Krishna at that time? Firstly, when Krishna says Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha, Krishna is not asking Arjuna to become some kind of schizophreniac. That, at one level you are remembering Krishna, at another level you are fighting also. It's not that we have to become like a split personality. Rather, the devotion to Krishna permeates into the innermost core of our being so much that Krishna becomes the objective of everything that we do. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives the example for this. He says that suppose there is a householder is working. Now that person may be doing business deal, that person may be doing various kinds of work, and the person is attentive to do it efficiently so that one earns a good living. But at the same time, that person is, in his home in his heart is thinking about his wife, his children, and is thinking, I am doing all this for them. So yes, I want my child to be educated well, I want my family to stay nicely, to have comfortable living and all that. So it's not that the two are disconnected, but because there is that affection for one's family, so that permeates one's profession and that motivates one as an underlying factor. So similarly, he says, when a devotee becomes attracted to Krishna, Krishna becomes the goal for a devotee for whatever one is doing. And with that goal in mind, with that underlying motivation of wanting to serve Krishna, wanting to do everything for Krishna, then the devotee works, then everything becomes Krishnaized. So firstly, the point is, when Krishna says, always remember me, it is in terms of making him the underlying, unifying objective of everything that we do. Now, what do we do when we are not at that level? So when, right now, yes, Krishna is our objective, but we also have many other objectives also. So that's why there are 2-3 different things. One is, we definitely need to have some solid quality time for exclusive or focused devotional service. Because by that, our connection with Krishna becomes reinforced. So sometimes people, if you ask them to chant the holy names, they say, Bhagwan ka naam to 24 ghanta chalu hi hai. 24 hours I'm chanting the names of the Lord only. Well, if it's going on inside. You say, if it's going on inside, why does it not come outside even for 1 minute? You know, if we keep something constantly inside, now we will push it aside. That's what happens. It just goes aside. It can't last. So we need exclusive time for focused devotional service. That is the sadhana that we do, and that is the satsang that we have. That's the first thing which we absolutely need to have. Then secondly, in terms of our activities, there can be passionate, that our environment may be in passion, but we don't necessarily have to be in passion. That means, if you see in the Amrut Manthan Leela, the churning of the milk ocean, it is described that the Krishna or Vishnu, he helped everyone, and the devatas were pulling the mountain from one side and the asuras were pulling from the mountain from another side. So now it's interesting, it is said that Vishnu entered the devatas as goodness, as sattva guna, and he entered the asuras as passion, as rajoguna, and the Vasuki was the rope, so he entered Vasuki as tamoguna. That Vasuki went to sleep, otherwise he would have created more trouble. So now the interesting point is, now if the churning is to be done, from both sides the pull has to be applied in a symmetrical way. So the significant thing is, the devatas were animated by goodness and the asuras were animated by passion, and still there was symmetrical pulling. So what this means is, it is not that when we are in goodness we cannot work in a way that is equivalent to working in passion. That means a devotee can perform as well as those other people who are performing in the passion environment in passion. So how does that happen? It happens by a gradual internalization of our consciousness. For example, say first time we do something. First time, say if, I'll give my experience. First time when I was giving class, I was so worried, what will people think about me? Have I put my tilak straight or not? And so many externals come in the mind. So but then, so when we do an activity initially, we focus a lot on the externals of the activities. But as we keep doing the activity, gradually, how I am looking, how people think of me, that becomes less important. And what becomes more important is whom I am speaking about. What am I speaking about? Am I pleasing Krishna? So gradually, in any activity that we do, if we do it, when I am talking about goodness over here is, goodness means we create some sort of schedule, some sort of regularity, some sort of routine. So when there is some sort of regularity or routine, then the externals don't take so much of our consciousness. And then we can go more internal. And then gradually, we can, as our consciousness goes internal, we can focus more on for whom we are doing the work, without adversely affecting the external quality of the work. Although the devatas were in goodness, they were able to churn as competently as the asuras in passion. So similarly, as devotees, if we create a schedule and if we try to develop overall goodness, our consciousness will go inwards. And that way, we will be able to focus more on Krishna. And of course, thirdly, as you said, within our within our professional activities also, we can try to create as much devotional stimuli as possible. That means, if we have some devotee colleagues, then we meet for lunch together and we discuss something about Krishna. Or if we have using a computer, we can put a wallpaper of Krishna. In some companies, you can use your earphones while you're doing working, so we can have some kirtan going on. There is a lot of room within the process of devotional service for individual creativity. Individual creativity means, according to our situation, how can we best remember Krishna? That we can find out according to our talents, our interests, and our circumstances. And this way, we can also have, as I said, three levels. First is, we have a solid time for Krishna, by which our internal connection with Krishna is established, and by which Krishna will gradually become the motivation of everything that we do. Just as a householder, for him, his family is the motivation for doing everything. And secondly, we also try to create a regular schedule and cultivate goodness, by which, while doing activities which may be passionate also, we can go inward and learn to focus more on Krishna. And thirdly, we can also create whatever external stimuli is possible, by which we can remember Krishna. We can Krishnaize our environment within our particular situation. And the whole principle of Varnashram was not to actually divide society into castes. The principle of Varnashram is to harmonize one's material necessities with one's spiritual growth. That means, if a person is of a Brahmana, then they give that person intellectual work, then that person can do it without too much agitation, too much conflict, and then person can move onwards towards Krishna. So, as our movement progresses, we will have more and more improvised manifestations of Varnashram. Improvised manifestations means, we may not be able to have social divisions like Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, but we can create systems wherein devotees can do their material professions in a spiritually conducive environment. So for example, now we have so many projects. We have Bhaktivedanta Hospital, where devotee doctors are working together and they are doing their material profession in a spiritually conducive environment. We have Gopal's Garden, where children are getting education. That is more or less a material necessity, but in a spiritually conducive environment. So as our community evolves, as our movement evolves, these external supports will also come more and more. But till then, we should know that Krishna is Bhavagrahi. So if we have that sincerity, we want to remember him, and we want to strive to offer everything to him, then even if we are not able to remember him constantly, as much as we are able to remember according to our capacity, Krishna sees that, he appreciates that, and he rewards that. Thank you very much. So we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.